to Cody in the Cinema. Today I'm discussing 4 films I watched over my snow days. Been excited to just sit down and enjoy some films I've had in my stack because I no longer have any paid streaming services. The only thing I use outside of this right now really is Canopy, and that's, has limited streaming you can do. So, unless you count Tubi. But first thing, not the last thing, is 12 Angry Men. I had not seen this in many years. I'd forgotten how good the writing was in this film. If I had to, say to someone, what's the perfect screenplay, it would probably be the one from 12 Angry Men, starring Henry Fonda, in a courtroom drama where he is the only juror out of 12 who has a reasonable doubt that he's willing to express on a hot day amongst his peers, and the way that he slowly works the room and gets people to think about their choices. It's a fascinating little film. It takes place mostly in one room too, just tables, people sitting around. I mean, when there is a break, it's in the bathroom, and it gives you a little bit of a break from the action. But this is one of the terrific black and white films that I often tell people, if you have never seen a black and white film and you like courtroom dramas, this would be a great place to start. My wife actually hadn't seen this with me, and she loves that kind of thing. And so we sat down together. I said, I can't believe that. You need to see 12 Angry Men, and she really enjoyed it. One of the great movies in the collection, and I love the cover. I've read some of the little booklet as well. Definitely should check this out. It talks about how this was kind of juxtaposed to some of the more action-packed films of the time period. But 12 Angry Men was nice to have a rewatch. I've seen this film many times. Brand new to me. Second film was a film I got maybe over a year ago, and I just haven't sat down with it. That really touched me and impressed me, and did live up to the hype. This is called Baraka. This was a documentary of sorts filmed. It says it was filmed in 24 countries. It's got that high definition. I love that Roger Ebert really championed this movie, and so the film on the front does have a quote from him. Baraka makes the earth and its inhabitants seem touchingly fragile. It's a good way of putting it. So the film, I thought what the film was going to be was a bunch of pretty visuals of different places on the earth that exist, and then some interaction with people from different remote places or tribes, things of that nature, and that is some of the film. It is stunning to look at, especially if you've been to the places. So there are a few scenes in Utah, and I've done one of the hikes at one of the spots in Utah with an arch over it, and it goes through arches and canyon lands in different places if you've been to those national parks. But there's more to it than that. So there's this whole segment where we've been in nature, we've seen some absolutely, just hypnotic dancing and singing and festivities from folks around the world. And then we get thrown into some urban areas, and there's this one sequence, or it's a long sequence, where all the cars are just flying around and like very Metropolis-esque, and there's like chickens being thrown in the around in the factory or warehouse or whatever, and it's just a real indictment on a kind of life that is just so profit driven and so speed oriented that I don't think the movie is very shy about its criticism of that, and that almost completely worked for me. Several spots, the soundtrack I thought was as good as the film itself. I will probably download this soundtrack at some point and listen to certain sections. There was a really riveting use of drums, especially in some of those urban parts, but there's another part where some children are walking through poverty, but there's a joy to their experience as they go forth, and you can see, and think to yourself, what if they had more than this world has given them? And it's an effective film, even at, I think it's 97 minutes. It basically flies by. And the concept of waste, material waste, is very rarely told this effectively. You definitely need to see this, even if you're like me and you don't watch all that many documentaries. Baraka is a must-see, and I'm glad to have that. I have a few other films like it I'm going to check into, but I think that's kind of the gold standard of those. Another film I'd been meaning to watch for a little while that I got in the auction that I enjoyed more than I thought I would. It's called Demolition. This was a 2015 Jake Gyllenhaal film, and very early on, Jake, he has a family crisis. An accident happens. It influences how he interacts with his father-in-law, and a lot of the film is how he interacts with his father-in-law. And in his journey to deal with this crisis, he meets, I believe, what was that, Naomi Watts? Yeah, he meets Naomi Watts, and she has some crises of her own, including a really overbearing boyfriend, live-in boyfriend, something, a son who needs some guidance. A lot of these tropes aren't, it's not completely new territory, but it is told in an entertaining way. The black comedy is pretty good at it. The actual kind of gimmick of the film is that Jake Gyllenhaal starts dissecting everything. So he'll take, to try to find himself, I guess. This isn't that psychologically deep, but it's entertaining. So he takes apart his work computer. He demolitions things with a big hammer. Demolition, he beats stuff up. It's kind of satisfying to watch, although it can be painful. At one point he beats up some really expensive stuff, and you're like, I would like to have that. Am I supposed to feel sorry for you? Is that destruction supposed to feel freeing? Because it's kind of giving me anxiety. But I guess the studio had to have the gimmick of Jake beating up stuff. That part of it wasn't as entertaining, I think, as just the interactions of the characters. Particularly, like I said, Chris Cooper, who I've admired in a number of pictures, as the father-in-law, I think gives the strongest performance, the most memorable. And he has to wade through some tricky territory in there. I'm really talking around a pretty big spoiler here. A series of spoilers. So if you haven't seen it, it's worth a watch. It was like, I probably wouldn't see it again. Like if somebody wanted this that I knew, I'd probably give it to him. But I liked it. I thought it was a good film. Jake Gyllenhaal. All right. Finally, a movie that I think of what I watched is likely to stick with me the most, and a film that just kind of almost put me on the floor. This is one of the most intense films I've seen, maybe ever. And it's going to be a little difficult to describe exactly how effective it is, because for some people, you're not going to like this movie that have seen it. Some people don't. Some people think this whole thing is just kind of too long or a wash. But this is A24's The Zone of Interest, and I have the Barnes & Noble copy. I got this at Barnes & Noble. And the only thing I didn't from the physical media release, I only got some lobby art cards in here. And they're cool, but I would have liked to have had a booklet. Film by Jonathan Glazer, who I think directed Sexy Beast of all things, which is a very different film than this. So mine came with these art cards. So, The Zone of Interest. I knew about this, but I didn't actually know how effective it would be at what it was doing. So, Zone of Interest is a film set in, literally right next to Auschwitz death camp, which was a huge facility, and it still exists, and you can still tour it. The museum you can tour. And the family, there's an SS officer who's the head of a family who lives right beside of it. And I didn't realize it would be right beside the death camp. So there's a watchtower, and it's just literally there's a wall, and then the death camp is basically right beside their backyard. So as this family interacts and goes through their normal activities, you hear certain sounds on the other side of the wall. Now, to set us up for that at the beginning, there's a long intro where you see darkness and you hear disturbing noises and music. And that kind of musical idea carries, and it's important that that's established early. There are scenes in here in broad daylight, particularly when these women are walking through the backyard, that every time you heard a gunshot or something, you you're imagining what you're not seeing on the other side of the wall. And these characters are so used to these atrocities that they're just continuing to go through the motions. The wife is extremely materialistic and has a sense of, building social status, and she's just not pleasant. The SS officer, he's just a career climber. One of the hardest to watch scenes is a young boy. It seems like he sees something out of the window that might have been a prisoner escape. Again, you don't get a whole lot of looks at it, which I think makes it more effective. And he kind of goes up the window and looks, and he kind of comes back and plays with his toys. Like, there are a few scenes where you see the family go through materials that they've stolen from prisoners, or that someone's stolen and given to them, or however it happened. There are some terrifying shots of the Nazis planning the crematoria and so forth, and how they're going to go about this mass execution and murder of all these innocent people. And there's some good visual effects taken from the top of this, kind of in a distorted view below. On Letterboxd, I said this film made me feel like Satan was hiding in like the corner somewhere in every single shot. And I don't know a better way to describe it than that. I mean, you really feel like there is some evil demon or presence in every frame that you can't see, that is there. It's just a whole like every single frame. The dog sells it too, because there's a dog running around a little like off, like not behaving like a normal animal would. And you kind of wonder how much of that is like the noises and some of the things you occasionally hear over the wall. The smells, there's some ambiguity about how characters handle that. There's a cool use of black and white that I liked, that I thought was nice, that the film experimented a little bit beyond just like pure realism. And the film is gorgeously shot. But one of the scenes that really made this such a 5-star masterpiece for me, there's a scene where an SS officer is like walking around a nice building inside with just lavish decorations, and the whole building's just very, very nice. It looks like something out of Barry Lyndon. And there's still like that undercurrent of that disturbing and that music, and some of the sounds that the director incorporated, like you can't even get away from the atrocity there, despite how beautiful that some of the images are in the film. And they are beautiful. So it is a mesmerizing effect and a unique effect, because there were times in this picture I'm sitting there and I'm still just on edge, but I'm looking at these beautiful images and I don't know how to process those two together. And that is the sign of great art. You cannot process what you're seeing. I watched this film in 2 settings, and it was anxiety producing. It was horrible to watch. It's just a film everyone should see and understand the actual pure evil of Nazis and what they did. And on top of that, there is a reference. I feel like this is worth saying. There is a reference to what Auschwitz looks like now. Like I told you, there's a museum you can walk around now, and I loved like A+ how that was done. A+, like it felt like it was appropriately incorporated into the film, because sometimes when films like get to that point and they like incorporate the modern day, it can feel a little bit like just tacked on, to the narrative. It didn't feel that way in this. Uniform, great performances, original concept, one of the best films of the 2020s. If I am such a fan of Wim Wenders and what I consider his Ozu, like Perfect Days movie, if it weren't for that film, this would very easily be my favorite of that year. Right now, I don't know which one it is. I don't know if it's Perfect Days or this. They're very different films. It's a phenomenal piece of work. So I know I talked a lot about the Zone of Interest. I just think, like, man, I wish that came out like right now again in theaters. I think that would serve the world well. But that's the one that affected me the most, obviously, because I spent a while talking about it. But just to review the films we watched: 12 Angry Men, a great rewatch as always. 5 stars. Baraka, I gave Baraka 4.5 stars. Demolition, I gave 3.5 stars. And Zone of Interest, I gave 5 stars. So that's what I watched. Do you have any thoughts on any of these films? If you do, click the like button for me, please. It will help grow the channel. And leave me a comment. Tell me what you think about them. Do you think I overrated or underrated something? And we'll see you next time on Cody in the Cinema.